High in the remote Indian Himalayas, surrounded by jagged peaks and swirling mist, lies Roopkund Lake, a small, frozen body of water with an unsettling secret. Picture yourself trekking through these cold, desolate heights, guided only by the dim light of dawn. As you approach the shoreline, you notice something strange beneath the ice. Through the clear surface, you see bones, scattered human skulls and skeletons, eerily preserved, untouched for centuries. But this isn't the result of a single disaster. These remains belong to people who died at different points in time, sometimes separated by hundreds, even thousands of years. It's as if the lake has quietly gathered lives across the ages, drawing them in, only to reveal their presence much later. First discovered by a forest ranger in 1942, Roopkund, now often called Skeleton Lake, has fascinated scientists, historians, and explorers alike. And the more they've uncovered, the stranger the mystery becomes. Genetic studies show that the people who died here weren't from one place. Some came from South Asia, others from as far away as the Mediterranean, separated by thousands of years. Despite decades of research, one question remains unanswered. What brought all these people to such an isolated, inhospitable place, and why did none of them make it back? Tonight, we'll examine the enduring mystery of Roopkund Lake. We'll look at what science has revealed, the leading theories that have emerged, and the unsettling pattern that continues to defy explanation. A frozen lake that seems to claim lives again and again across time, continents, and cultures. So settle in, perhaps dim the lights, and join us as we explore Roopkund Lake, a place where the landscape is silent, but the past speaks volumes. Roopkund Lake lies high in the Indian Himalayas, situated over 16,000 feet above sea level in the rugged region of Uttarakhand. Hidden among rocky peaks and icy trails, this remote lake is rarely visited. Despite its small size, just 40 meters across and no deeper than 10 feet, reaching it requires an arduous 5-day hike through dense forests, alpine meadows, and steep rocky trails. It remains frozen most of the year, thawing briefly during the warmer months to reveal its startling secret. The environment around Roopkund Lake makes survival extremely challenging, nearly impossible for those unprepared for its harsh conditions. The region endures bitter cold, fierce winds, sudden violent storms, and rapid weather changes. Sparse vegetation, mostly alpine grasses, small shrubs, and hardy wildflowers, can endure the thin, oxygen-poor air. Wildlife is similarly limited, including only specialized animals like snow leopards, Himalayan tahr, musk deer, and high-altitude birds. These challenging conditions explain why Roopkund has long been considered deadly and inaccessible, and why local shepherds, despite knowing of its existence for generations, quietly warned each other to avoid this sacred yet unsettling place. Beyond these shepherds, the lake remained largely unknown to the rest of the world. It wasn't until 1942 that Roopkund Lake entered public consciousness. Hari Kishan Mathwal, a British forest ranger assigned to patrol these remote mountain slopes, found himself wandering near this obscure lake while mapping the rugged Himalayan landscape. As Madhwal approached the lakeshore, he noticed something unsettling. Pale shapes scattered among the stones at the water's edge, catching the sunlight in an unnatural way. Stepping closer, a chill ran down his spine as he realized what he was looking at. Human bones, skulls, rib cages, leg bones, arms, and even jaw bones lay exposed to the mountain air, partially submerged beneath the icy waters. Initially, Madhwal assumed he had stumbled upon the aftermath of a recent tragedy, perhaps pilgrims caught unaware by a sudden storm, or travelers overcome by harsh mountain conditions. But upon examining the bones carefully, it quickly became clear these remains had been there far longer than just a few seasons. Weathered, bleached, and scattered, the bones had clearly endured many harsh Himalayan winters. Following Madhwal's startling report, researchers and investigators soon journeyed to this remote lake to uncover more about the mystery. What they found was far stranger and more complex than anyone imagined. Instead of just a handful of skeletons, They discovered hundreds of individuals, scattered all around the lake shore and resting beneath its clear, shallow waters. Men, women, children, all seemingly struck down suddenly, without obvious cause. No clothing, weapons, or personal items remained to offer immediate clues about who these people were or how they had died. Because of this eerie discovery, Roopkund Lake became popularly known as Skeleton Lake. News of the site quickly spread, capturing imaginations worldwide. Initially mistaken in the 1950s for lost Japanese World War II soldiers, later evidence disproved this theory entirely, deepening the mystery. Yet despite numerous scientific investigations and archaeological studies, the lake continued to guard its secrets closely. Who were these people? Why had so many gathered at such a remote and inhospitable place? And perhaps most puzzling of all, what caused their sudden, unexplained demise? To begin unraveling these mysteries, it helps to look not just at modern scientific theories, but also at the stories and beliefs of the people who have lived near Roopkund for generations. Long before researchers arrived at the scene, local villagers had their own explanations for the strange sight at the lake, stories deeply woven into the fabric of their folklore and culture. One of the oldest and most persistent stories involves an ancient king named Jasdawal. According to legend, King Jasdawal was traveling through the Himalayas with his queen, who was pregnant at the time, along with many servants, dancers, musicians, and warriors. Their goal was to reach the shrine of the goddess Nanda Devi, a very important deity in the area. The king intended to worship the goddess and ask for her blessings for his unborn child. But something about the king's lavish procession angered Nanda Devi. Some villagers say it was because the journey was overly extravagant, considered disrespectful to the modesty expected by the goddess. Others thought the queen herself broke local customs by approaching the sacred site while pregnant, which traditions at the time strictly forbade. Whatever the exact reason, the goddess became deeply offended. In anger, she unleashed a sudden hailstorm on the travelers. Large hailstones, about the size of cricket balls, fell from the sky onto King Jasdawal and his entire group. With no trees or caves for shelter around Roopkund, the king, his queen, and everyone with them had nowhere to hide and were unable to escape. But the story of King Jasdawal isn't the only legend about Roopkund Lake. For generations, the lake has been closely connected to pilgrimages to the shrine of the goddess Nanda Devi. Every year, villagers and pilgrims set out on a difficult trek through steep mountain passes and unpredictable weather to reach the shrine high in the Himalayas. This pilgrimage is a test of faith and endurance, and completing it is believed to bring blessings and protection from the goddess. Yet, not every pilgrim returned safely. Over time, stories spread about those who traveled into the mountains and never came back. Locals spoke of pilgrims who might have accidentally broken traditions, taken wrong paths, or unknowingly shown disrespect. These stories led villagers to believe the bones scattered around Roopkund belonged to these lost pilgrims, punished by divine anger. As knowledge of the bones spread, the lake developed a reputation as a place to be both feared and respected, a stark reminder of the dangers associated with offending higher powers. For decades, these local legends provided the primary explanation for Roopkund Lake's eerie mystery. However, once scientists began closely examining the site, a very different and far more complex picture emerged. When Roopkund Lake was first discovered, researchers initially believed that all the skeletons belonged to victims of a single tragic event, perhaps a pilgrimage gone wrong, or travelers unexpectedly caught in a severe mountain storm. For decades, this straightforward explanation seemed logical. However, recent scientific studies have dramatically altered this understanding, revealing complexities that no one anticipated. In fact, National Geographic estimates that between 500 to 800 individual skeletons are visible at Roopkund Lake, with the true number likely higher due to some remains being buried beneath rocky debris, lost under shifting sediments, or worn away by erosion and human interference over the years. This remarkably high number underscores not just one isolated tragedy, but rather the cumulative misfortune of numerous groups of travelers who ventured into this remote Himalayan region across centuries, each ultimately meeting a similarly tragic fate. Scientific examination to uncover this mystery began in the early 2000s, when DNA analysis was still quite new and limited. Early tests at that time concluded that the skeletons belonged exclusively to South Asians, all of whom died around the year 800 AD. Researchers speculated that these individuals might have accidentally fallen through thin ice, resulting in sudden tragedy. Early evidence indicated a mixed group of men and women, mostly aged between 18 and 35, along with bones from children, providing a straightforward but incomplete picture of what had happened. However, recent advances in DNA technology and radiocarbon dating have dramatically altered these early conclusions, revealing a much more complicated scenario. In 2019, a team of geneticists, archaeologists, and historians from respected institutions like Harvard University, India's Birbal Sahni Institute, and genetic researchers in Hyderabad returned to Roopkund Lake. They plan to use advanced radiocarbon dating and DNA testing to finally solve the lake's long-standing mystery, hoping the bones would clearly show who these people were and how they ended up here. But the results they uncovered were far more complicated than expected. Advanced testing revealed something very surprising. Roopkund Lake was not the site of a single tragedy, but rather the location of several separate disasters spread across nearly 1,000 years. This groundbreaking study thoroughly analyzed 38 skeletons, confirming that these remains belong to distinct groups from widely different time periods. Of these, 23 skeletons had South Asian ancestry, but even among these individuals, there were different groups separated by centuries. Some dated back to the 7th and 8th centuries, while others belonged to around the 10th century. This finding shattered the earlier assumption that the remains were from a single local tragedy. Even more unexpected was the discovery of another group of 14 skeletons from a much later period, around the 17th and 18th centuries, who had clear genetic links to distant Mediterranean regions, specifically the Greek island of Crete. Researchers were surprised because there was no known historical connection between Crete and this remote Himalayan lake. Additional genetic testing also identified skeletal remains linked to Southeast Asia, further expanding the geographical puzzle. These discoveries raised important, unanswered questions about why such diverse groups of people from distant regions, separated by continents and centuries, repeatedly ended up at this isolated and harsh mountain location, all meeting similar tragic ends. Despite intensive research, scientists still do not fully understand why these different groups of people traveled to Roopkund, or how they all encountered their mysterious fate. To better understand these surprising findings, Harvard researchers teamed up with Indian archaeologists to conduct more detailed archaeological surveys at Roopkund. Experts from the Birbal Sahni Institute examined soil samples and organic materials around the lake, hoping to find additional clues. Geneticists from Hyderabad continued their detailed DNA analyses, confirming the diverse mixture of South Asian, Mediterranean, and Southeast Asian origins. Several theories have emerged from these extensive studies. One popular explanation is that Roopkund was an important religious pilgrimage site over many centuries. The Himalayas have many shrines dedicated to various deities, and Roopkund Lake might have been one of these sacred locations, repeatedly drawing pilgrims despite the dangers involved. Another theory suggests that Roopkund lay along ancient mountain trade routes connecting India, China, Tibet, and Central Asia. Traders or nomadic groups traveling these difficult paths might have accidentally strayed from safer routes, possibly taking shortcuts or trying to escape severe weather, unknowingly wandering into dangerous conditions at the lake. Detailed studies of skeletal injuries provided evidence supporting these theories. Many bones showed signs of severe trauma consistent with deadly hailstorms, reinforcing the idea of violent weather events. But other injuries indicated different disasters such as avalanches or accidental falls, showing that Roopkund witnessed multiple fatal incidents rather than just one. Additionally, some researchers suggest disease outbreaks could have contributed, as travelers weakened by illness might easily succumb to the harsh mountain environment. Another puzzling aspect was the notable lack of personal belongings or significant cultural artifacts. Researchers found only small items like fragments of clothing, bamboo parasols, slippers, seashell earrings, and basic wooden objects. There was no clear evidence of weapons, valuable trade items, religious relics, or personal valuables. This absence of artifacts suggests that these victims were unexpectedly and tragically unprepared for whatever fate awaited them. In the end, scientific evidence from Roopkund strongly indicates multiple separate tragedies occurred at this remote Himalayan lake, involving diverse groups of travelers from very different origins and time periods. Despite these significant discoveries, the central mystery still remains unresolved. What repeatedly drew people from different continents and across centuries to this isolated Himalayan lake, where they all shared the same tragic end? For many years, the leading explanation for the deaths at Roopkund Lake was a catastrophic hailstorm. Researchers initially supported this idea due to distinctive skull injuries, which matched impacts from large hailstones, some potentially as big as cricket balls. This explanation aligned neatly with local folklore, particularly the legend of King Jasdawal and his entourage, who were said to have been struck down by hail. However, recent scientific scrutiny has raised doubts about this theory. Although severe hailstorms do occasionally occur in the Himalayas, critics argue that storms intense enough to cause such widespread fatalities across different groups and eras would be extraordinarily rare. Additionally, historical records and local traditions elsewhere in the region seldom describe hailstorms resulting in mass casualties. Given these concerns, scientists have explored alternative theories. A particularly plausible scenario involves exposure and hypothermia. Roopkund Lake's high-altitude location makes travelers extremely vulnerable to rapid temperature drops, sudden snowstorms, or freezing rain. Without proper clothing or shelter, people could quickly succumb to severe cold, confusion, and exhaustion, conditions that might explain the scattered distribution of remains around the lake. However, this theory still doesn't clearly explain why so many travelers from different backgrounds and time periods would choose to gather at such a harsh and isolated spot where survival would have always seemed unlikely. Perhaps the most surprising hypothesis arose from recent genetic findings, suggesting that some skeletons might be linked to Alexander the Great's lost scouting parties. Around 326 BCE, Alexander's armies reached northern India, sending scouts into remote Himalayan passes to find routes for expansion. Some historians speculate that isolated detachments of these scouts, disoriented and lost, might have perished near Roopkund Lake. This theory would explain the unexpected Mediterranean genetic markers found among some remains. Yet, this intriguing theory remains speculative, with no definitive archaeological or textual evidence directly connecting Alexander's troops specifically to Roopkund. A more controversial explanation is that some deaths were intentional, possibly related to religious rituals or deliberate spiritual sacrifices. Given the proximity of Roopkund to sacred pilgrimage routes, it's conceivable that certain travelers intentionally journeyed here as an ultimate act of devotion or sacrifice. Historical records confirm that some cultures practiced ritualistic deaths or self-sacrifice. While difficult to confirm conclusively, this theory could explain why there are so few personal artifacts or belongings at the site, suggesting preparation for a final, purposeful journey. For completeness, another theory occasionally considered by researchers is water poisoning caused by bacterial contamination, such as cholera or toxic algae blooms. Historically, outbreaks of waterborne diseases or exposure to toxic substances could quickly incapacitate and kill large groups, especially travelers already weakened by the arduous journey. If groups had consumed contaminated water from Roopkund Lake, it might explain their sudden and simultaneous demise without clear signs of physical violence. However, modern testing of Roopkund's waters shows no evidence of such toxins or pathogens today, making this theory difficult to verify conclusively. Additionally, some have suggested the lake might have been filled over time by avalanche deposits from even higher elevations, potentially bringing bodies from elsewhere down into the lake. Yet this scenario faces considerable skepticism. The likelihood of numerous separate groups of travelers being positioned even higher in the dangerously inhospitable mountains above Roopkund is very slim. Furthermore, the relatively intact and undisturbed condition of many skeletons is inconsistent with having been carried down by powerful avalanches. These factors make the avalanche deposit theory intriguing but improbable, further deepening the enduring mystery surrounding Roopkund Lake. Ultimately, today's researchers generally believe the truth behind Roopkund Lake's tragedy likely combines elements from several of these theories. Rather than a single explanation, the site probably witnessed multiple unrelated incidents over many centuries, including deadly weather events, hypothermia, avalanches, intentional ritual sacrifices, and perhaps even lost groups of ancient explorers. This combination of scenarios would explain both the diverse origins of the victims and the mysterious circumstances surrounding their deaths. Today, Roopkund Lake faces a new set of problems. Threats very different from the storms or disasters that once struck here. After centuries of being hidden and isolated, modern human activity has started to impact this unique site. One of the biggest threats today is tourism. As Roopkund Lake has become more widely known, the number of visitors has significantly increased. While many tourists approach the site respectfully, the rise in foot traffic has begun to damage trails and disturb the delicate environment surrounding the lake. Even worse, some visitors take bones or bone fragments home as souvenirs, causing irreversible harm and permanently destroying important archaeological evidence. Over the years, vandalism has also become an issue. Bones have been moved, damaged, or deliberately rearranged by visitors, potentially removing critical genetic data and context that could have helped scientists better understand the lake's mysteries. Another major concern is climate change. Rising temperatures in the Himalayas are causing glaciers and ice around Roopkund to melt faster than ever before. As the ice melts, it reveals more human remains each year. While this exposure might provide researchers more opportunities to study the site, it also leaves the bones vulnerable. Without protection from ice, these remains quickly deteriorate, further jeopardizing scientific efforts to properly analyze and preserve them. These challenges raise important ethical questions as well. Scientists and visitors alike must consider whether it's right to disturb or handle these human remains. After all, these bones belong to real individuals who tragically lost their lives centuries ago. Finding the right balance between scientific curiosity, historical preservation, and respect for the deceased continues to be a key ethical challenge at Roopkund. Due to these threats, scientists, conservationists, and local authorities emphasize the urgent need for better protection, stricter regulations, and careful management of the Roopkund Lake site. International cooperation and local stewardship are viewed as essential strategies to safeguard the site for future generations, without harming its historical value or disrespecting those who perished there. In the end, protecting Roopkund Lake beyond simply preserving bones or uncovering historical mysteries, it's about safeguarding a site of human significance and ensuring that those who lost their lives there are remembered and respected. Despite ongoing efforts to preserve and understand the site, many important questions about Roopkund Lake remain unanswered. One major puzzle is why people from so many different places and time periods ended up at this remote Himalayan location. Researchers are still unsure why travelers from Europe, the Mediterranean region, Southeast Asia, and various parts of India all visited this difficult-to-reach location. Some experts suggest that Roopkund might have had an important spiritual or cultural meaning that we don't fully understand yet. Others have offered more unusual ideas, such as the lake possibly being viewed as a sacred healing spot, much like other famous historical sites around the world. In this scenario, travelers might have come to Roopkund hoping for healing, explaining why there are very few belongings left behind. If these travelers were already weakened by illness, the harsh conditions could have easily led to their deaths. With climate change causing ice around Roopkund to melt, scientists expect to uncover more remains and artifacts. They hope new technologies, like advanced DNA tests, chemical analysis that reveals people's diets or hometowns, and ground scanning radar will help provide clearer answers about who these individuals were and why they were there. Researchers want to find out if these travelers intentionally made pilgrimages to Roopkund, if they were simply lost, or if perhaps the site once had special significance that's now forgotten. Roopkund has also inspired some more imaginative theories. For instance, some people mention sightings of unusual lights or unidentified flying objects in the Himalayas, suggesting extraterrestrial or paranormal explanations, though there's currently no solid evidence supporting these ideas. Another interesting but unproven suggestion involves the existence of ancient trade routes or forgotten exploration missions that might have connected faraway civilizations. While these theories lack scientific proof, they show just how intriguing and thought-provoking Roopkund's mystery continues to be. Local researchers, historians, and international scientists are currently working together closely to carefully document and protect Roopkund Lake. They're digitally mapping every bone and artifact they find, building a detailed historical record. At the same time, researchers are paying close attention to local traditions and oral histories, knowing these could hold valuable clues. Today, the people living near Roopkund have mixed feelings about the lake. They hold a deep respect for it and remain mindful of its significance in local legends. While increased tourism brings new economic opportunities, villagers are often concerned about disrespectful visitors, disturbing the peaceful atmosphere, removing bones as souvenirs, or causing unintentional damage. Elders regularly remind younger generations of Roopkund's cultural importance, ensuring respect continues despite modern challenges and international attention. As more secrets are revealed at Roopkund each year, researchers remain hopeful that improved technology and continued collaboration will eventually solve the lake's mystery, finally explaining why people from many places, separated by vast distances and centuries, repeatedly came to this isolated Himalayan lake, only to meet the same tragic end. Now, we want to hear from you. Which theory do you think best explains this eerie mystery? Or perhaps you have your own idea about what really happened at Roopkund Lake. Let us know your thoughts down below in the comments. We love hearing your theories. And if you enjoyed unraveling the secrets of Roopkund Lake with us today, make sure to like the video, as it really does help our channel grow, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos. As always, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, stay safe.